The happiest times in my job was when I placed 3 kids with a family and I just walked away knowing that that was their permanent home. That day, I knew, and it was, you know. They're happily adopted now, and I keep in contact with those kids.
Well, I had been looking for a job, something that can actually fit for me, like my background, that I could actually be successful at doing. And I thought that once I learned about Child Protective Service position being available, I decided to apply because I had a history that I felt that I could connect with potential clients and their living situations and the things they go through. So that was very personal with me, and that was a connection for me.
I was a foster parent for a long time, and I ended up adopting 4 kids. So after that adoption, that final adoption, I felt kind of sad that I couldn't foster anymore. So I was like, well, let's be a social worker. So I actually went back to school specifically to be a Child Protective Service worker.
When I was younger, my mom and dad separated. My dad was in and out of jail and prison. My grandmother had to step up and she took guardianship of me. And she raised me pretty much up until I was about 13. So during that course of my early childhood to almost being a teenager, she had to apply and use HUD for housing, food stamps to provide food for me, clothing vouchers for me to have clothes. So my grandmother needed assistance. She was one of those grandparents who stepped up when the biological parents weren't able to care for a child. And thankfully, my grandmother did, and I didn't have to go through the system because that's a challenge for kids when they're in those tough situations, mentally and emotionally. I think that helps me with my approach with the clients because when I do meet with them and they're frustrated and they're like, well, I've worked with CPS workers before and this is how it was, and I just try to break that cycle, that bad cycle in their mind that, hey, we're not all bad, we can be different, we can be more understanding, we're here to help you. So. You have to be committed, self-motivated, and willing to take on challenges. I think that's the biggest thing, I think. Because when I started this job, my background, my college degree has no dealings with social work. It's political science, business. So when I stepped into this job, you know, I was willing to make a sacrifice to learn the job, the ins and outs, step up to the challenges. And you have to be self-motivated because a lot of times you're self-managing yourself, your workload, your clients. So you have to be able to do that.
They have to be organized, they have to be a planner, but on the other hand, they have to wing it. You have to be both people because you can plan your day and then it just blows up into the unknown. Time management is a big thing in this job because you have deadlines after deadline, in addition to keeping those kids safe.
I think a lot of times on paper it looks like it can be a job that can be worked, but like I was saying before, the challenges, being self-motivated and being committed. Because when you step in the door here and then you get these referrals that we get, an intake, you never know what you're going to go walk into. That it's the unknown that you deal with, and if you're willing to step up to do that, then you can face these challenges and be successful with what the job entails. But one thing that I do know when I step up to face these challenges and I go in these homes, if I don't feel safe, we do have that option to call law enforcement to do a safety check with us. At no point in time do you have to just go to a home by yourself if you don't feel safe. And that's a big thing as well too, because our safety is important. Well, basically they just think, hey, when we're knocking at the door, we're here to take their kids. And I think that's the wrong way to look at it, because our job isn't to just take your kids. Our job is to make sure the children are safe and to help you keep your children in the home. So if we can do that by making sure your children are safe, or if they're not safe, and provide you services, then that's what we'll do. And a lot of times parents and other relatives that may get CPS referrals think, hey, they're not going to help us, they're not going to do anything, you know, putting us down, and it's just not that way. And I try to use a more professional, soft approach with clients, because they just have that bad view of what CPS is about.
We take kids out of dangerous situations, we take it to court, and we do everything possible to put that child back in the home. You know, we don't just place kids in group homes and foster care. We look for any appropriate families that can help take care of those kids while we try to put the family back together. And
a lot of times, you know, I knock on people's doors, and the allegations in the referral aren't adding up to what they would be. For example, I had a referral that they said that they had no power, no food, no water. You know, I knock on the door, they've got the TV on, the lights are on. Those are giveaway signs before I even ask them questions. So sometimes those false reports really speak for themselves when you actually put your eyes on the home and the children. So, documentation is a very important thing in this job. I think finding the balance of doing documentation and actually doing your field work is a thing that I think as a child protective service worker that you got to find balance in, because we may be required to do 2 hours of documentation in the morning between 8:30 and 10:30, but a lot of times it can take more than 2 hours to do documentation. For example, for me, I do my required documentation between 8:30 and 10:30. A lot of times I may even come in early to get a head start on my documentation. So I may come in at 7:30, 8 o'clock. And if I come in at 8:30, I may even document in the evening, because the work is so great, and the clients that we meet and the collaterals that we meet and interview, there's so much information to put in the computer, and depending on how fast you are with the computer and the keyboard, you may need a little bit more time. So usually if I do two, I may do two in the afternoon as well. So 4 hours documentation and 4 field work, because there's balance in that. If you're just doing 6 hours of field work and 2 hours of documentation, you're going to be having a lot more field work that needs to be documented than you're putting time for yourself. Back to self-management. If you self-manage yourself, you'll be able to find that balance. So if you're willing to be a child protective service worker, you got to be able to use the balance in that, because balance is very important as well in this job. And I find that every day. And it took me some time to get acclimated with doing it. And once I did, everything runs a lot more smoother, and I'm happier when I come to my job as well.
They have to not take things personally. We do things per policy, and a lot of times my personal opinion differs from policy, but that's what we're bound by, and they need to separate their personal opinions to what our job actually entails.
It's a challenge, and being born and raised here my entire life, I know what it was like from being a young child, from 4 or 5 years old all the way to now at the age I am. And I think that, you know, when I went to college, and I went to college out of state, I came back when my son was born, and I decided, hey, I want to be committed to the state. I want to do some things that I haven't done. I want to give back the way that the state gave back to me. And the challenges that we face here, not just here at CPS, but across the state, it's great. It's so large that it takes a team to do it. And it's just like we're doing CPS. It's a team. It's not just one person. Because sometimes when we're doing our job, we need our coworkers to help us and stuff like that. So, but you know, the city of Charleston, it is a great city to live in, but we're facing challenges with these drugs. And these drugs are ultimately affecting not only parents and children, but other members in the community. The restaurants we go to, the shopping centers we go to, and even the value of homes, I'm sure it's affecting that as well. So it's affecting things all across the board. And we're facing challenges in CPS to face these greater number of referrals that are coming through centralized intake, because more people are being more, open to seeing and keeping their eyes open to seeing the things that, hey, I see a kid with his mom and she looks like she may be on drugs, or, this kid's being abused. So people have got their eyes open now because of the drugs. And it's a big challenge we're facing, and we will continue to face that until things slow down. The one thing that keeps me going is just that I know that I was one of those kids. I know that I was in those positions where, my dad was doing things that he shouldn't have been doing, that my mother abandoned me, that I had to live in places that I felt that were not safe and that were dangerous at times, and I had to make it through those times. So when I'm meeting with clients, especially children that are vulnerable and they're in these situations that I was in, I can connect with them and I can understand them, and I can kind of help them cope when I'm talking to them, and I can share my story with them. Because I feel if I can share my story, my personal story with them and connect, they'll understand where I'm coming from, that I'm not just another worker, but I'm someone who actually has gone through things similar to these clients as well.
Believe it or not, I've seen some people out that I've taken their children into custody, and they've thanked me, like hugged me and thanked me for helping them get the things that they needed corrected.